Good morning, everybody. This is a project that was funded by Tran-SET, and I have here my colleague, Dr. Hatim Sharif, who couldn't make it for the presentation, so I'm going to present it on behalf of him. This is a project that we approached City of San Antonio before we wrote down the proposals, and we asked them what is really the problem that you guys are facing in the city and what we could do to help you out on it. So the first question they asked how much you could do. They said we can do anything in terms of analysis, in terms of site visits, in terms of feasibility studies. And they mentioned to us the Vision Zero program. So Vision Zero program is an international program that starts in Europe, and the purpose of the program is to try to minimize the crashes and the fatalities that's occurred for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers. And we told them, okay, we could help in that by focus our study on the city of San Antonio to try to understand what is the reasons behind the crashes and the fatalities that happens on the city roads, excluding the on-system roads, which is the highway roads, and what we could do if we understand exactly the reasons behind those crashes, and maybe we can propose countermeasures to solve these problems. So that was the objective of the study, is that we're going to perform a comprehensive evaluation of the crashes that happens in the city of San Antonio to find the roots of the problems. And the focus would be on the intersection-related crashes. The reason we looked into that because after breaking down the crashes that happens, we found that the majority of them happens within the intersections areas. So as part of their program, Vision Zero, and as part of our initiative as well to help Region 6 on the regional priorities problems, we said, okay, we will work with you towards that initiative to try to increase the awareness of finding the reasons behind those crashes and increase the awareness about them, and that from there we can reach out to the community to try to raise that awareness and try to help minimize those number of crashes and injuries that our city of San Antonio citizens are facing. So definitely before we needed to find out where is we can get the data, because without the data we won't be able to do this work. And we are lucky enough that our program has access to the crash records in the state of Texas, and that's what we call it, the CRIS, Texas Crash Records Information Systems, and they provide it to us as researchers in the Department of Civil Engineering, and we have access to the data from 2006 to 2017. And really you have every kind of data you can think of that lists down the reasons and the crashes in terms of the vehicles, the date, the time, the locations, climate conditions, all what you can name it. And some crashes would have a sketch from the first responder or the police officers to tell exactly what happened at that crash. Some of them, not all, if you have access to the sketch that the police officer will draw. We also have access to the fatality analysis reporting system, the FARS, which highlights the record data that's specifically focused on the fatality. And that's across the United States, and you can short it down to state of Texas. And then we have also other source of looking into the VMTs, vehicle mile traveled, and the populations, and we can get this from reliable source of data through TxDOT. Definitely from these sources of data, we're able to take it to the next level and run massive analysis on it. And that was the purpose, to arrive first at this step and that's what we're working with. And I can tell you, we've been very productive with them. We have a monthly meeting. We sit down, we share what we found every month in terms of the data analysis, in terms of the site visits. We lay them down on the map of San Antonio, and we share that with them. From their perspective, they get these data. they have to communicate with the community on the finding that we collect and on a report that they publish it as well on an annual basis. So they collect all the data, and the expectation by the end of the year is that they have all this information published on the report to the San Antonio citizens, tell them exactly the reasons behind that and what we could do about it. So the interesting part of it is that it's a dynamic relationship that we have with them. This is different than any natural project that I have with the DOT. When we meet maybe once a year, maybe not. So this relationship that we built have allowed us to have our students to get engaged more and more, and also to the classroom as well, when we have to share with them some of the data that they collect, some of the data that we collect, we give it to the students, and the student will have a student project on it. So I can tell you it's a very dynamic relationship so far. So back to the points, the data that we have, we allow our graduate students to run massive number of analyses on it and lay down this analysis on a GIS map and running statistical analysis. So I'm going to share with you the pattern and how San Antonio citizens drive in the city and what we're expecting from them. This is a distribution of the crashes in city of San Antonio, and this is a snapshot on 2013. First, we have the data over from 06 to 017. We just show here the 2013 data, because every year these dots are getting more and more and more. City of San Antonio expecting thousands of people moving in every day and expecting the populations to double in 2030. So if we have a problem today, this is nothing 10 years from now. It's getting worse and worse every day. And definitely these problems keep growing, and the more we do about it today is the more we can help ourselves in the future. And one of the initiative that the city of San Antonio is working on now is smart rides, different alternatives for mode of transportation, because it's definitely not going to help for everyone to have a single car to drive with. Ride sharing is an initiative, and we try to communicate that to the community, because the problem here is not going to solve by building extra roads or widening the roads. It's not going to get anywhere. So every dot you're seeing in the map here is a crash that happens in 2013 only. And you can see the clustering of the crashes in the downtown, and it gets wider as you expand. And this is just crashes, documented crashes. There are non-documented crashes that never come to crash if the crash is very light crash, which doesn't have property damage and never been called a police on site. So the method here is that, so from this slide on, I will show you some of the results that we collected from the data analysis. And the first one here is to look into the intersection. The reason we're focusing on the intersections after we break down more than 600, actually 100,000 crashes in city of San Antonio, is that more than 50% of them happens with an intersection and intersection related. So basically when the crash happens, the police officer will come to the site and they will identify the location of the crash exactly. If it is a nearby an intersections, they will lump sum that into what we call intersection related. So if you add both those two columns together, this is accounted for more than 70% of the crashes in the city of San Antonio. So that's where we are focusing our study. That was the first step, to break them down. The second step, we're looking into the pattern from the driver gender and the driver age, because we need to remember this is going to be delivered to the community. So we need to know which group of the community we can reach out to the most, and what is the best way of communication to reach out to them to target your campaign. So looking into here, you will see that the group age from 15 to 34 is the most critical group that has the most number of crashes. At the same time, this is the same group that has the more number or the higher number of VMTs. So it makes sense to have more number of crashes happen to them. Breaking this down into female and male, you will find that male drivers have more tendency to have more crashes versus the females. Uh, we looked into this from several perspectives. Female drivers tends to be. I'm out of time. That's fast. Okay. So I'll run then. Focus on the days. Weekdays tends to be higher number of crashes versus the weekends. In fact, we thought originally that we have time to drive by during the weekends, but in fact, the weekdays is the most critical days of the week, and that's what we're talking about Monday to Friday. Morning, definitely, as Dr. Samir mentioned, the PM and AM peak hours is the most critical time during the day. So the rush hour as well is associated with more number of crashes during the day, and we hope we can break these down throughout the day to minimize that. While definitely the higher the congestions, the higher the crashes that happen at the same time. You get a little bit of a release during the night time, which is eventually because you have less number of VMTs. So the next step was to highlight exactly the critical intersections. And by looking into the size of the circle, you see it in the map, and I'm sorry if the map is not really clear. The higher the size of the larger the size of the circle, the higher the number of clustering crashes that happens within the circle. So you can identify here the very critical intersections in the city of San Antonio that has massive number of crashes during the year. So this is allow us to focus our studies in specific intersections initially and see what we could do about it before we move on to less critical intersections and so on. So at least it's break down our analysis because there are too many of them to be analyzed within a year frame. So we have really to highlight the priorities and getting from there down the list to see what we could do from year or after the years that we are running this study. Other information, 4 or more lane divided has more crashes, although it's divided, but it turns out to be having more crashes, which is very interesting to look at it that. I'm expecting the undivided will be more crashes, especially that you have an open lanes in 2 different directions. But that would be worthwhile to look at it. Interestingly enough, when it is clear day, so we look into the climate as well because we have these records of data. Clear day has totally higher number of crashes versus other rainy or cloudy days. While we drive every day, whether it's rain, cloud, it doesn't matter. We still go to work every single day and we still have these driving, but it turned out when we have a clear driving climate, we tend to have more crashes. So drivers would have more tendency to be cautious when the weather is not supporting the drive. So it's completely different from my perspective previously that when I looked into the daylight, that although we drive mostly in the daylight day, so it makes sense to have more crashes at that time. But what happens during the dark, not lighted, that it is the least number of crashes. Practically, maybe we don't drive as much during the night time, so which is probably 8 hours a day. But it's tendency that the daylight would be the most critical. So when you look into the light solutions, it is not critical everywhere. It is the daylight when we have the most crashes that takes place. We have definitely more data here. Signal light, although we have signal lights, but we tend to all those intersections with signals to still have more crashes. So I can tell you right front from here that as a driver that throughout the city that I drives too many miles, and really I can tell you that thousands of miles I make per year for just touring and scanning the sections of the roadways. Drivers do not comply with the red lights. They cross on red all the time. And there is no enforcement. And definitely it has to go back to campaigning and educating those drivers that red light is an enforcement that has to follow. So the findings, I have to stop right here. The findings from this study is that initially we are looking into the data. We try to break down what really happens at the city level to see how the driver's behavior, what is the factor that we could tackle first in order to find exactly the reasons behind the crashes we're expecting. And we're taking this to the next level because most of the crashes we expect in intersections involve pedestrians as well. So it's still an ongoing. Our next steps to go and visualize what happened during those intersections, and hopefully we can find the countermeasures for that.